Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Policy, Financial and Development Committee. This is a virtual meeting. It is 6 p.m. on Tuesday, the 16th of March 2021. My name is Councillor Gill, and I am the chair of this committee. And my fellow councillor, Councillor Ian Ridley, is the vice chair. In accordance with the regulations made under Section 78 of the Coronavirus Act 2020, this remote meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The audio visual recording will be made available on the council's website and YouTube channel shortly after this meeting. All meeting participants are reminded to speak slowly and clearly in the direction of the device microphone at all times. A reminder that mobile phones and other electronic devices should be turned off or put on silent mode, and those participating in the meeting should refrain from taking telephone calls. For the purpose of recording of attendance, I can confirm the following councillors are present and participating in this remote meeting. Councillor Bill Bolter, Councillor John Boyce, Councillor Linda Broadley, Councillor Lateef Dar, Councillor Linda Eaton, myself, Councillor Dean Gamble, Councillor Pittici, Councillor Jeffrey Kaufman, Councillor Lily Kaufman, Councillor Kevin Lloydell, Councillor David Lloydell, and the Vice Councillor Ian Ridley. We also have the following officers in attendance: Samuel Ball, Assistant Solicitor; Emily Byrne, Democratic Service Officer; Tommy Campbell, Head of Finance and Deputy Section 151 Officer; Dave Gill, Head of Law and Democratic and Monitoring Officer; and Steve Tucker, Democratic and Electoral Service Manager; and finally, Adrian Thorpe, Head of Built Environment. For the purpose of the regulations, I can confirm that before this remote meeting went live, all participants confirmed they could see and or hear all other participants. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with the Council's adopted remote meeting procedure rules, a summary of which is attached to tonight's agenda for reference. May I also politely remind all participants that they must not act in a disorderly or disruptive manner or otherwise interfere with the committee's proper conduct of its business. Thanks. Right, we'll go straight on to agenda item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies this evening from Councillor Bentley and Councillor Robert Eaton.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Appointment of substitutes.
None, Chair.
Tucker. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Declarations. No, thank you very much. Minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any questions? No. Arising from the previous meeting. There was no action list arising from the previous meeting. Again, the 6 petitions and deputations. Have there been any petitions or deputations, Mr. Tucker?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. At this point, I would like to welcome Councillor Naveed Allen to the meeting. Agenda item 7, Treasury Management Policy and Strategies 2021-2022. Report of Head of Finance and Deputy Section 151 Officer. Over to you, Mr. Tommy Campbell.
Yes, the purpose of this report is to inform of the Council's current Treasury management practices that are being carried out. A lot of, just the general gist of, a lot of this information in this report is statutory information that all local authorities are required to provide. And in the recommendations are that the Treasury management policy as set out in Appendix 1 be approved, and that the prudential indicators for 21-22 in Appendix 2 also be approved, that the Treasury strategy and plan for 21-22 as set out in the Appendix 3 be approved. So if I go through the report, the turn over to page, the second page of the report, which is actually titled page 9. It gives some general information about the Treasury Management Service, which helps funds the capital programme. So the general gist is with Treasury Management, the council borrows money to fund the capital programme and has to repay this money over a number of years. That's the general gist of it. And the council also has to comply with government rules regarding prudential indicators, and obviously being a local authority, we have to be careful with our borrowing. We only restrict it to certain types of borrowing. And what I've got attached here, item 2, which is a Treasury Management Policy for 21-22. So it's a document that goes through what the requirements are, what our policy is with regard to our legal requirements, and it goes into quite a bit of detail in this document, which is information that would be provided each year. What is also, if I just highlight what's slightly different, the council, an item is on page 19 under performance management. We have brokers who advise the council on any potential investments, and the two brokers we have is Martin's Brokers and Traditional Brokers. I think Traditional Brokers is a change from who we had previously, and this document also goes on page 21 to highlight the responsibilities of officers within the council regarding the separation of duties regarding certainly treasury function. So the general gist is, if someone's putting funds on the bank account, a different person's got to actually approve for that payment. So there has to be a separation of duties. And the Section 151 officer his duties is to ensure that everyone has appropriate training and are capable of doing the role within Treasury and know what they're doing. And that's the general gist of that report. And then if I go on, that's Appendix 1. Then if we move forward to the next document, Appendix 2, this is the prudential indicators. So the general gist of this is following government legislation called the Prudential Code, which local authorities need to follow. And also, if you turn to pages 27 and 28, so if you go to 27 first, it highlights the breakdown of capital expenditure. It splits it between the general fund and the inHRA. And so to fund the capital programme, the council would borrow money, or it might receive capital grants to fund certain expenditure. And this just is this gives a general gist of what the programme is at the start of the year for 21-22. And then item 2.2 on page 28, if you go to the next page, that gives a split between supported capital expenditure, supported spend and unsupported spend. So supported spend is when the government issues grants to certain types of capital expenditure. Unsupported spend is where the council would borrow funds for specific purposes, but still within the government's within the guidelines for local authorities. And it just goes on to further down in that chart to say how the capital expenditures financed by borrowing, capital receipts, various different grants, and major repairs, and yeah. So it just lists another, and we haven't got any other types of contributions, but there's a whole variety of different things that can fund the capital programme. And that's the general gist of Appendix 2. I'm going to go to Appendix 3 now, if you're okay to move on. So this is the Treasury Strategy Plan, and it just basically puts in the objectives of the of Treasury Management. And if you turn over to page 33, look at item 3.0. So the council's got to have a balanced budget. So when we're borrowing, we need to have the ability to be able to repay back anything we're borrowing, or if we're doing a capital program, the income generation needs to be able to fund the capital program. And then item 4.0, current treasury position, it just gives, this table gives, goes to show what type of debts we've got, what type of borrowing we've got. So we've got fixed rate debts. So we borrow from the PWLB, which is the Public Works Loan Board. So when we borrow money from them, sometimes it could be on a long-term basis, or short-term or medium-term basis. And this table just shows the difference. So sometimes the council may borrow money for a certain period of time, and then at a certain time it repays it, then may borrow again. So this table just gives a summary of that. And then the other pages within this report just go into further detail on borrowing, long-term borrowing. So if you go into page 36, which is an item 6.2, it splits things even further in the type of borrowing. I'm just trying to have a go through there. And then the following pages just goes into more detail about the borrowing. That's the general gist of that actual report. And it's a statutory requirement for councils to produce this information each year and update it. Does anyone have any questions at this point in time with that report?
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I've got one question on Appendix 1. I'm not
Okay.
sure you're going to be able to answer this because you weren't here last year.
Okay.
Besides traditional brokers being new brokers, are there any other differences between last year's report and this year's report? And if you can't answer that, could we have a written?
The only last year's report, Clive Mason, he put in the, I think within the report, the Treasury Management report, is we are able to, because we're thinking about investing in a property fund, and the way the report was written last time, it enabled us to do that, and that still applies within this report. But in actual differences, no, it's the same. The only difference is the amount of the capital or the amount of money we've borrowed, machines short term and long term. It fluctuates throughout the year. So everything else should be the same, except for this capital program change slightly.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. In future, could officers at the end of this report actually note down the changes from last year's report, because it would make the council's lives a lot easier.
Okay.
Because obviously this is a very technical report, so that would be most helpful in the future. Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey or Lily Kaufman.
Thank you, Chair. Well, you're stolen my thunder, actually. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Campbell for the explanation. You see, somebody who's SIPFA qualified and all the experience can give us an explanation. It sounds plausible. I'm sure it's plausible, and you can make it understandable. I think Mr. Campbell will be the first to agree that this is not easy reading. And when I attempted to go through this, it would have been very helpful, as the chairman just said, if you could just point out the differences so we can go to that and concentrate on that. But I do thank you for the report. The chairman's stolen my thunder, but it's something perhaps to learn for the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kaufman. Councillor Bill Bolter.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Connie. Page 29, I see that the council's aiming to borrow, or can borrow, £26 million. for additional housing. Is that all the housing sites, or is it just certain housing sites?
Some original costs.
It's on the bottom of
Oh
page
yeah, sorry,
3.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd have to 26 million. I'd have to, we split on the chart above, it's split in percentages, additional over the next 2 years. So housing project where we will require 26 million. So with the borrowing, I mean, this is what is required at a point in time. So if, say, the capital projects change, then that figure would change. So this is just at a point in time.
Okay, I just wondered if that was all the housing sites we've got earmarked. Well, it's only
Mr.
one
Thorpe.
or two of the housing sites we've got earmarked.
Councillor Bolter, Mr. Thorpe might be able to help out. That is you to Mr. Thorpe.
I have to say I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Can we look into that and get back to you with the answer?
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Thorpe.
Can I just carry on then, Chair?
Yes, of course, Mr. Bolter.
Find it. Well, basically the question is, I know we haven't at the moment, but if we had got money to invest, I don't know what to call it these days. It should be AAA rated people we invest in. I know it's changed now, it's got a different title now. But can we have a list of the counterparties we can invest in if we have any money left over? That's what we've had in the past, list of counterparties, but it's not here this evening.
Okay.
I think as members we need to know if we have got money, who we're going to invest it with.
Okay. Yeah, I can come back to you with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bolter. Councillor Kevin Lloydell.
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, it fits in quite nicely what's just been said. Can I go to page 12? At the bottom, temp 1, risk management. It talks about management and control, Treasury Management risks, and will report annually on their adequacy, etc., etc. It's the same question on page 14, temp 6. Well, it talks about annual reports in the light of what's happening within the marketplace and everything else, and how things are going to change quite quickly. From a member's point of view, as it's already been alluded to, about reports coming not annually, but as and when things change. Is what we see here cast in stone, or is it flexible in as much that when things do change, or if they change, I think they will, we're able to keep up to date with it throughout the year? Thank you, Chairman. There are other questions, but I'll carry on.
Thank you, Councillor Lloydell.
Can I answer that question,
Yes.
Councillor? Yeah, so normally we'll set the policy, then in the September, we report back to PFD on any material changes. There's no reasons why we can't, if there's any material changes, report back at another PFD meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Councillor Lloydell.
Yes, thank you. Where am I? Again, page 18, 7, market risk management. Again, that comes back to timescales, and I appreciate you just answered that one. And again, page 18, temp 2, performance management. Again, the quality of service provided by these brokers shall be monitored on a regular basis and reviewed annually. Again, it comes back to the annual bit. Will that, as things do change, and they will change, we will get an update through the P&R committee throughout the year? I think you've answered that, Commy.
Yeah.
Is that the same answer?
Yeah, it's the same answer. So in reality, this year we haven't really used the brokers much because of the COVID situation, but going forward, if we've got any major investments or we're taking advice, yes, we would. And that would go back to PFD.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Are there any other questions, Mr. Tommy? There doesn't seem to be any hands up, so we have 3 recommendations, A, B and C. I move the recommendations.
Sorry, Chair, I think Councillor Lloyd was waving at the screen. I think he wants to come back in.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Lloyd.
I couldn't get to the hand quick enough.
Right.
Sorry.
Carry on, Councillor Lloyd.
Yeah, I do apologise. Can I go to page 27? Breakdown of capital expenditure 2.1. There's a sliding scale there which talks about each year 20, 21, 22, and it's going in the downward slope. Is that a positive thing, or what would the impact be, especially on the inHRA, where it goes right down to 1.5, and at the end, obviously, the total is 152. Is what would the impact be on that?
Okay, I can answer that question. So, with that table, that's showing known capital future expenditure. So if you notice, for the year 23-24, we've only, the general fund, we've got 20,000. It's because there's some unknowns that year. So this is only knowns or estimated. So if the capital programme changes, or the council's policy on investment or development changes, then these figures would move around. So yeah, so that's the general gist of it. Yeah.
Thank you, Colin. Appreciate that. Okay.
Is that it, Councillor Lloyd?
Sorry, Chair. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I've moved the recommendations. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Lloyd. We go to a name vote now.
Thank you, Chair. So, Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Bolter.
For.
Councillor Boyce.
For.
Councillor Broadley.
For.
Councillor Dar.
For.
Councillor Eaton.
Sorry, for.
Councillor Gamble.
For.
Councillor Joshi.
For.
Councillor Jeffrey Kaufman.
For.
Councillor Lily Kaufman.
For.
Councillor David Lloydall.
For.
Councillor Kevin Lloydall.
For.
And Councillor Ridley.
For.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. We'll move on to agenda item 8, financial outturn report, Q3 2020/21. Over to you again, Commy.
Okay. Well, this report gives a summary of the overall council position for this financial year at Q3, and what they and also the recommendations are that the contents of this report in the appendix be noted, and the second bit is that the additional capital expenditure for 21-22 is set out in paragraph 3 of this report be approved. And if I go on to the main part of the report, which is on page 41, it highlights there that it explains what the budget is for the revised budget is for this year, which is 6,006.019 million. And then with the actual general fund, this year there is overspend variance of 292,000, which is overall 4.8% of the budget. And this overspend is mainly due to income loss and then I think I've broken it down into another table, which comprises of 510k expenditure relating to salary, agency, staff costs, and various supplies and services costs. And the forecast COVID-19 related income loss of 1.2 relates primarily to realign selective licensing income to 21-22. So what I'm going to do is just give you a general flavour of this report, because it's hard to put things down in writing. So for this financial year, a lot of we've had obviously a lot of income loss, and the government has reimbursed the council some money, but it's not all of it, which has had an impact. And also with the COVID situation, because if you notice in paragraph 2.2, you notice ICT costs have increased, and this was due to a number of reasons. One, due to the COVID situation, staff were working from home, so more additional equipment had to be provided so staff could do that. And there has also been additional costs related to COVID in general. And so staying with the report, if we look at, let's get the information together. If we look at table 1, if I just go through that first of all. So table 1, it highlights, it shows the bottom right hand figure, shows what the overspend is, 291,770,000. So if you notice, if I look at the Q3 variance, where we've got a credit, sorry, my screen's just gone funny. That's it, I've got it, it's come back. So where we've got a credit of 1.370 million, that's income that's COVID related income that's come in. That's offsetting some of the costs in other areas. So for instance, we've got finance and resources, which has a combination of things. So financial resources includes, for the purpose of this table, corporate assets, which has obviously had income loss, revenue and benefits, and HR. And there's a combinations of things that make up that £496,000. And then we have the law and governments, which is variance of 9.9 thousand. And then we have the built environment of 95,000 overspend, and community and wellbeing of 939,000. That figure, there's contractual obligations. The leisure service sits within that area, and there's various contractual obligations there where we were going to receive a certain amount of income, but obviously that didn't materialize, but we had to support the leisure service with some contractual payments. And then you've got customer services and business transformation, where you can see a variance of 156,000. There, a lot of the IT budgets sit there, and that's where we've had additional costs this financial year. So overall, even though we've had grants in for the government for COVID, we're still showing an overspend of 292,000 roughly. And if I move on to table 2, the next one down, this just shows a breakdown of the expenditure. So if I take the left-hand side of that table, it's showing what the supplies and services expenditure is, 165k, salary and agency costs, and also loss of income. So costs related to COVID so far this year is roughly 1.7 million, and we've had grants received for 1.8 million. That figure is different from the figure at the top, because some of the grants can be used to offset certain council costs, and some are for specific purposes. And again, that table shows what the variance overall is, 292k. And then if we move on to table 3, which shows a summary of the capital programme, which shows the general fund capital budget of 1.4 million for 2021. And then the spend to date is 903,000 at the moment, at that point in time. And the HRA budget is 2.185 million. And the spend at that point in time was 1.536. And so the total budget is 3.588 for 2021. And then if I move on to, what have I missed? The housing revenue account. So the housing revenue account is held separately from the housing general fund. And if you go to table 4, it shows that with the HRA, we look like we're going to make a bit more of a surplus. So the balance in the HRA we're predicting is going to be 1.194 million by the end of the year. So are there any questions to ask me at this point in time?
Councillor Bill Bolter.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Page 42, table 1. Did I understand that the community and wellbeing, it's over budget because of having to make payments for the loss of income for the leisure centre? Is that what that's? That is that the total amount, or is that there's more than that in there?
There's without going into commercial details, there's contractual obligations.
Yes.
Which is it's a good bulk of that.
Is there anything else in there then that we don't know about? Any other reason?
So some of the things, what you got to remember, some of these costs will be staffing costs relating that additional staff that had to be taken on related to COVID or COVID related staff, but it wouldn't. But the bulk is contractual costs, and so some of that cost in there would be offset by the grant income we got if anything relates to staffing. But the bulk of it is to do the leisure services.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolter. Councillor Linda Broadley.
Thank you, Chair. Again on page 42, table 2.
Okay.
The government said when we started with all this COVID thing that didn't matter what happened, they would cover all the costs. And you've gone through saying that we have received some, but not all of it. Are we expected to receive the rest? Is one question. But also grants received 1.88, 0.823. I've done it that way because it's easier, it's written down. Those grants received, is that all for the council to recover costs, or is that grants that were given to people to pay out, that we had to pay out? You know, people who were entitled to, if they've got a business and they've got 10 grand or whatever, is that included in the grants received? Or is the grants received the money that we got back from the government because of what we've had to spend?
Okay, that question there, the answer to that is no. The business grants, we've received a considerable amount in business grants throughout the year, which has been paid out or in the process of being paid out. So that 1.8 million, that relates to money the council's received, where most of it can be used to offset costs the councils had to incur, like additional marshal staffing costs or other costs. But the money but where the big difference is, it doesn't cover everything, and also with the income, I'll give you an example of the income. So we've had money back where we have to claim it 3 times in the year. We've claimed it for 2 periods of time. We've got a third period we've got to claim at the end of the year, which I've sort of factored in. But you don't get all the money back for your income. So basically, you lose 5%, and then you get 75% of every pound back from the government. So there would be a hit, and also if you take some of the services, let's take the planning service for example, income that you would have generated. There's not so much demand on planning or building applications, so there's other areas you would have lost money in. So in a nutshell, we've received money, grant money, but it doesn't cover all costs, and that's the main reason why we got that deficit.
So are we likely, you said you've got the third one to fill in and get back.
Yeah.
And I was a bit concerned when you said we only get 75p in the pound
Right.
back, when we were told at the beginning of this pandemic that do what you have to do and costs will be covered. So what you're saying is that's not correct.
Yeah, we don't get everything back. So as I said, there's a deduction of 5% first, and then you get 75p in every pound of income you expecting to lose.
So that accounts, presumably not just this council, but all councils are going to be
all
totally underfunded because we were told a lie. Right.
That's the principle that's happening throughout all local authorities.
Okay, thank you for that.
Are there any other questions to Connie? Councillor Kevin Lloydell.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the comments that Tommy's made, and a good report there. It's a pity that when we talk about our staff having to work from home and the additional cost that's incurred by them, that's not covered. When you consider our MPs been given £10,000 to cover their costs when working from home, doesn't seem fair somehow, does it? Especially for what they do. It is. Coming back to page 42, if I may, the COVID costs. I'm just trying to get my head around all those figures, and I think I might understand it, but perhaps you can clarify for me.
Yeah, sure.
That the top of the chart, table 1, it's the variance is 1370, etc.
Yeah. Then
we come back down to table 2, and we've got COVID related cost 1.701. And then the net COVID cost is 1370, which is the same figure at the top. Can you just point me in the right direction how that works, please?
Right, okay. So what the councils try to do is capture as much as the COVID related costs as possible. So there may be things that we missed out, but where we've had to do expenditure, especially relating to COVID related costs, we've tried to capture it in a certain area. And also with staffing, there will be staff in these times being diverted to doing COVID related tasks like marshals, or give you an example, certain tasks like even like statement of accounts, where normally you would bring someone to come and help with statement of accounts or certain tasks, but they've all been put back. So we're just trying to, so the aim was to try and capture as much as the cost as possible. So even sitting with some of the other areas, we may probably haven't captured everything, because we haven't captured everyone's time, but it's what we have managed to capture.
So if I may, Chairman, to follow that through, if you take the higher number or the lower number from the higher number, there's a deficit of 348,858. Now that's my reasoning is wrong, because did you say that the COVID cost is X, but we're only receiving Y, which is less than the actual cost?
Sorry, could you just point me to what figures you're pointing to? Sorry,
that's all right. It's me just playing about the figures.
Which,
When I
which
talked about
figures you're referring
cost
to?
related, 1.7, and then the cost, the council cost is 1.3.
Right, okay. Right. Right, okay.
The difference is that quite a lot.
Right, okay. So so the council's cost is 1.7 million, that's right. And then the grants is, so you got the 1.370, so there is a gap. So that's the gap that's been identified. Because the other thing to factor in as well, there has also been vacancies throughout the service, and obviously some of those additional costs have been offset by vacancies, staffing vacancies. So yeah, that's a fair estimation.
Okay, thank you. Can I come back, Chairman? Is that okay?
Yeah, carry on, Councillor
Carry
Lord.
on. So again, coming back to what used to be called the revenue support grant, wasn't it? It used to be 70% government funded, then 30% collected locally. Over the years, obviously, from 2015-16 and 21-22, there's been a reduction of 1.2 million, which is 41% reduction. Now we don't receive any RSG anymore from the government, do we? 70% is gone. It's been replaced by business rates. Does the business rates match that of the 70% revenue support grant, or is it a lot less? It matched like for like, in other words.
That's a good question. You're right. So the answer to that question, yes. In the past, councils would have got RSG, but obviously with the business grants in the general, just the council keeps a percentage of that. I haven't done an analysis to see if it's what the comparisons are, but obviously the business, the money we're getting from business grants will vary from year to year. I can't answer that question today. I can come back and look back at say 2 or 3 years or something.
Yeah, I understand that. It's just that it's trying to get the before it was quite easy to understand. Now it's because of things are being reduced by at least 65% overall, and that's just not us, that's all councils, I have to say. So it doesn't matter what ribbon you wear, they're affecting themselves anyway. They're all being affected likewise. It's just that we're trying to balance the books properly, but we've as our external audits say, we've always had a sound medium-term financial plan. It's just that unfortunately outside sources impact on that, which we're having to react to, which is not really a way a business should be run. It should be proactive and not reactive. I do appreciate that. Okay, that's fine, Tommy, but thanks for your input. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Lordell. Councillor Ian Ridley.
Thank you, Chair. Page 46, the capital programme. I've just got one query about halfway down, the Coombe Park Pavilion extension. That's reliant on Section 106 income from Cottage Farm Phase 2, the developers there. Is there a reason why that didn't appear in this year? And how likely is it to appear in the coming year's budget? Thank you.
Sorry, I just pulled it up. Sorry, I didn't have that in front of me. Could you? What was the which reference number?
It's 54568 Coombe Park Pavilion extension.
545. Oh right, okay, I can see it. I haven't. Sorry, Councillor, I haven't got an answer to that question at the moment. I'd have to find out. Yeah,
that's fine. If you could bring that to a future meeting.
Mr. David Gill. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just for information, that Section 106 agreement is currently still in negotiation, and it's hoped that it will be signed by the end of March, in which case then it should appear in the capital programme next year once the monies have been paid over, which is going to be on a trigger system. So there will be a certain percentage of houses built / occupied, and then the payment will be become due and payable from the developer.
hope that answers your question, Councillor Ridley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Gill. Thank you.
Councillor Bill Bolter.
Thank you, Chair. On page 46, inch and a quarter down from the top of the page, it's 54151 air monitoring equipment. This equipment, I understand, was 106 money from a certain development on Blaby Road, and it's still not been installed. So I've been trying to find out if it's going to be installed or not, and I can't seem to get an answer. It's now been going on now for the best part of 2 years. We were told it was waiting for the electricity to be connected, but according to this, they've returned the money. So I'm a bit confused on that one. Somebody can enlighten me.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bolter. Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Chair. My understanding is that the equipment has been purchased. It is still sitting with the manufacturer. There has been an issue with regard to the positioning of the unit in Blaby Road, and an issue with the electric supply, and that is currently being worked on by officers. I appreciate that it's taking a long time. However, everything was put back by the COVID pandemic, and when we resurrected that matter with Western Power, their staff had changed and moved on, and we effectively had to begin the process again. But it is something that is being monitored very closely.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Any other question, Councillor Bolter?
No, Chair, I'm still confused. That's why the money's not in the budget anymore, but never mind. That will come at a later date, no doubt.
Thank you, Councillor Bolter.
Yeah, I can just make a point on that, Chair. The money's not in the budget anymore because the equipment has been purchased and paid for. What is outstanding is the work that is required to put the equipment in situ. So,
Yes.
so we've purchased it. It's not in the budget anymore because we've paid the supplier. We are now working with Western Power to get the site ready so that the equipment can be installed and get operating.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Councillor Kevin Lloydell.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to be cheeky here because I missed off something. The reason I'm going to say it now is because I've got to speak to somebody tomorrow who's going to ring me about this, who's not happy with the increases, which is fair enough. I just want to clarify the amount of council taxes that has to be raised now is there's an increase of 22% that's now being levied to our local taxpayers. Is that correct? I've got it here, but I'm just saying, for a matter of record, it's important because when you talk to people about this and where it's all coming from, if I've got it wrong, I'll take the blame and I can clear off and go. But I need to be assured that, like the police, more and more of that money is being collected locally and not nationally. It's being cut. We're in a similar situation, like all authorities being cut, and now we're having to increase the council tax. And the change at the moment is over 22%, which is quite significant. I think it's important that the taxpayers are aware of where that rise is coming from. Thank you very much, Chairman, for your patience.
Can I answer that question?
Yes.
I can't remember what the exact percentage. I'd have to double check. But obviously, with the council set, there was a £15 rise with the police service, which contributed to the increase, and also with the, if I can remember, with the county, they increased their precept for adult social care, so there was an increase overall. What the percentage is, I'd have to double check my information because I can't remember. But no, Councillor Lloyd, I'm quite happy to come back to you with what I think the percentage increase is.
I appreciate that comment. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Kevin Lloydell. Councillor Lily Kaufman.
Actually, it's Lily with a deep voice.
Okay.
54114. It's the car park resurfacing. I assume that's the public car parks we're talking about. And it's been delayed, which is rather a shame, because while the car parks are empty, if it is the public car parks, it would have been a good idea to get it done. Is there any chance of getting this resurfacing done while the car parks are less full? Or do we really have to wait until hopefully the towns get busy again?
I think that's Mr. Gill to answer
Yeah.
rather than Tommy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The car parks have been delayed. From memory, it's to do with the Wigston Cemetery car park, and there's also something that has been budgeted in respect of the Bushlow House car park. But obviously, given that members have now made a decision that they're going to be that we're going to be moving from Bushlow House, they are on hold. Again, I need to speak with my manager to find out the exact details of what it is, and I'm more than happy to provide a response outside of the meeting as to where we are. And if we are in a position to bring them forward, then we will do.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Any other questions, Councillor Geoffrey Kaufman?
That's all right. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Ian Ridley.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to come back in. It relates to an earlier point on this report about what we get from government for COVID costs. Just to clarify, I think you said that there's 25%, we get 75p in the pound, but there's an initial 5% deduction before that. So actually we're getting 70%, is that right? Or
I haven't worked out that percentage, but okay, if you do that 5%, it's going to be in that sort of ballpoint figure.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to understand the point you made. Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ridley. Are there any other questions? No. Well, we have two recommendations, and we shall go to the. I shall move the recommendations. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Broadley. We shall go to the vote then. Over to you, Mr. Tucker.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Allen.
4.
Councillor Bolter.
4.
Councillor Boyce.
4.
Councillor Broadley.
4.
Councillor Dar.
4.
Councillor Eaton.
4.
Councillor Gamble.
4.
Councillor Joshi.
4.
Councillor Geoffrey Kaufman.
4.
Councillor Lily Kaufman.
4.
Councillor David Lloydall.
4.
Councillor Kevin Lloydall.
4.
Councillor Ridley.
4.
Thank you, Chair. That's also unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. We therefore move on to agenda item 9, collection and write-off of miscellaneous debtors quarterly 2020-2021, pages 47 to 49. Over to you again, Tommy.
Okay. Yeah, so this report is collection write-off miscellaneous debtors. So the general gist of this report is to put forward any debts that need to be written off, and I'll just go through the recommendations first of all. That the contents of this report be noted and that members approve the write-offs as detailed in paragraph 3 in the report. So if I then go to page 48, and I'll just, and then page 48, which should be, and then item 2, which is council tax and non-domestic business rates. So the annual debit to collect combined together is about roughly 41 million. And at the end of the third quarter, 83.21% of the council tax debit had been collected against a target of 85.2%. And then with the business rates, The 73.74% had been collected compared to a target of 82.29%. And the overall annual target is 98.5%, which for this financial year, it looks like we may not meet that. And then if you go into section 3, which is a write-off of bad debts. So what the council's policy is for debts to be written off under 5,000, that would be done by the section 151 officer or his nominated deputy, which would be myself. And then what table 1 lists out is a list of debts that I'm putting forward to be written off. So basically any amounts over 5,000 would need the chair of this committee or the members to approve. So the total amount of debts that have been put forward to be written off for non-domestic rates or business rates is £98,781.02. And I've listed out the items and I've put the names of the companies if they're a company or the business title, but where they are a business but it's got their individual names on, I've just anonymized this form. And these are the level of debts. So the debts here range from £6,899 up to the highest debt, which is pretty chic, of £34,000. So with the policy of writing off debts, the reasons that we'd normally write them off, if a company is dissolved or if it's an old debt, as highlighted on the sheet, over 6 years old, or the debtors died, or there's a variety of other reasons, but all debts are pursued, but where it's deemed uncollectible, they would be put forward to members to write off. And normally each year, the council sets aside, as part of its accounting policy, would set aside a sum of money to write off debts. And this is what's being put forward at this point in time. And throughout the year, other PFD meetings, at various times, further debts will be put forward to be written off once they've actually been reviewed and classified as uncollectible debt. And that's the general gist of this report.
Chair, if I may interject, Councillor Councillor Linda Eaton is suffering from a power cut at her home and she's disconnected, so she will reconnect as soon as possible and she'll be announced when she returns to the meeting. Thank you.
The same with Councillor Linda Broadley. I've received the text to say she has a power cut as well.
That's noted, Chair. Mr. Shugworth, I believe we're still quorum. We'll keep an eye on the numbers, Chair, so we don't drop below quorum. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. Councillor Jeffrey Orland. Councillor Kaufman.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's me this.
Sorry.
It's okay. These debts, are these considered sort of average within your contingency plans, or are they sort of over what you would expect? Thank you.
Okay, so each year, I can't remember the exact figure, we would estimate, in the accounts, we estimate, say, about £80,000 would be used to write off debts, this type of debt for business rates. Obviously, council tax would have a separate amount, but some of these debts here, they are older. Some relate to previous years. That's why the figures 98,000. So some are 2 or 3 years old, and I think the last financial year, I don't believe any debts were written off. I could be wrong on that, but not as much as should have been. The debt level was, there should have been more debts written off last year, which wasn't the case. So some of those debts relate from last year that are now been written off in 2021.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lily Catherine. I seem to remember that our debt write-off is extremely small compared with most councils.
Yeah, of course.
I think that is correct. Thank you, Connie.
Chair, just for the record,
Councillor Bill-
councillors Eaton and Broadley have now rejoined the meeting.
That's good to know. Councillor Bill Bolter.
Thanks, Joe. Yes, not going to detail. The Pretty Sheet company says company dissolved. That's fine. Was it a limited company? Even so, the directors, if they're trading insolvently, can be pursued for that debt of that company. So have we looked at that possibility at all? It's £34,000, which is quite a lot of money. You know, there's different ways of pursuing that, but I wonder if you could just comment on that, please.
Well, the council, we do use for outstanding debts, we do use collection agencies to pursue the debts, and if they can't recover the debts, then that would be part of the reason why they're on this write-off list. So we do use different avenues to pursue debts. So you're right, we just because someone owes us money, we don't just want to write off for any reason. So all debts are pursued, and the ones on this list are the ones that we haven't been able to retrieve the money back.
Does the company who recovers get a percentage? What's the incentive for them to get the money for us?
Well, I don't know the exact details of the company's details, but I know generally within the council, when the collection agencies we use for this debt or other debts, they obviously charge a fee on top. So we'll have the council's amount, and then there'll be additional thing, and they're incented to, this is their business, so they want to collect the debts, and so they would pursue the debts because it's everything they collect, they're going to get something on top.
Okay.
Mr. Gill, would you like to come in?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Just as a point of clarification, Councillor Bolter is correct that if a company is unlawfully trading, then the directors can be personally liable, but the decision on whether they're unlawfully trading is a matter for the administrator or the official receiver. So until such point as that decision is made by them, there is nothing that we can do. The fact that the company Pretty Chick has been dissolved indicates to me that it's a limited company, at which point we become an unsecured creditor, and it may be many months, many years down the line before the official receiver determines that the company was trading unlawfully. The thing about a debt is that if it's written off, it can always be reinstated if the circumstances change further down the line.
Thank you, Mr. Gill, for your explanation. I fully agree with you for once.
Right, Councillor Linda Brawley, nice to have you back.
Thank you. I do apologise. The power went out, gave me the shock of my life when everything went dark. I don't know whether somebody else has already asked this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. It is about the debt, the 98,781.02. I noticed that it's all, or it appears to be, or there is at least 3 businesses. Given the fact that we know, certainly in Wigston, and I think there are 1 or 2 in Oadby and South Wigston, businesses aren't going to open again, which obviously is going to affect business rates. But are we expecting to have to write off a lot more, given the fact that so many businesses, due to the COVID pandemic, have gone out of business? Is next year this going to look absolutely horrendous because they've not been able to pay their business rates or left debt for this council to have to cope with?
Okay, I can answer that question. So if, say for instance, they're refusing to pay us, we still would be pursuing the debt, because some of these items on here, they've got debts going back 2 or 3 years, and we use, as I mentioned before, I think you might have, we use agencies to pursue these debts as well as, you know, the normal means. And so going forward, you are right in one case. So the debts I've brought forward are it's quite low when you think of how much money we bill for business rates. So overall, it's about 12 million we bill, and we're collecting this year about 8. Yeah, so we bill about 12.7 million. So 98,000 is quite a small number of uncollectible debts in comparison. So going forward, yes, there will be further debts. There may be an increase, but the council will be using all efforts to pursue the debts. So it's only if there's no redress, we can't collect that debt, then we would even put it forward to being on this list.
Yeah, no, I accept fully what you're saying. My concern obviously is that because of the COVID pandemic and people not being able to trade, a lot more people are going to go bankrupt. A lot more firms will not reopen and probably have massive debts. So my concern is that in the future, probably the not too distant future, our debt list is going to rise significantly, which is going to add to the problems. Again, most councils will be the same, but I'm not a councillor for most councils. I'm concerned about Oby and Wigston. And it does concern me that this list is likely to rise quite considerably. But thank you for your explanation.
Thank you, Councillor Broadley. Councillor Kaufman.
Yeah, Jeffrey Kaufman, this one. I'm interested in this 11.5 grand, which has been charged wrongly. Surely that's not an uncollectible debt. It's a clerical error, isn't it? So it shouldn't even be on here at all. And I hope we haven't sent debt collectors out to collect this one if it's been wrongly charged.
So
we charged the wrong person in the first place.
So I haven't got all the history behind this debt, but as far as I know with this one, I think this one goes back quite a bit. The council's obviously charged, and at some point, and there's been a correction. So that's a fair point what you've put forward, but we've obviously charged and then we've had to write off the debts, because if we've raised a charge on our system, financial system, we still have to write the debt off.
Every clerical error has to appear to us as an uncollectible debt, which seems very strange to me. We can all make clerical errors and charge me anything you like, or anybody anything you like, and to have it listed as a collected debt when it's not a debt in the first place, I find rather strange.
So again with this, one, some of the historic, some of these debts are historic and they're still on the financial system. So in order to come off, they've got to go through the protocol of being written off the system.
Well, I just think it should be contrad rather than written off. So the amount of uncollected debts to us, in this case, should be 11.5 grand less. I don't know how many others there are, but you just can't say it's an uncollected debt if it never existed in the first place. That's the point I think I'm trying to make.
Yeah, I'll take your point.
All right, thank you.
Councillor David Lloydell.
Thank you, Chair. It's just in regard to the obviously the company's dissolved point of view. I understand obviously that we're writing these debts off and we're not expecting anything back. The two, Pretty Chic and I Am Discount, dissolved 2018, so very unlikely that we're not going to get anything back. Centre Signs, however, went into liquidation pretty recently in 2020. Are we saying that we're that quick to jump on writing this debt off that we're not going to get anything. Just a bit unsure as to have we tried anything to actually get this money back from these. It just seems a very quick turnaround to try and write that money off.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So in answer to that question, was Centre signed? If I believe correctly, these debts go over a number of years. So even though they've dissolved recently, the council has tried to collect the debts in the past and has been unsuccessful. So this is an accumulation of debts over a number of years.
Okay, so what process? Sorry, yes, thank you, Chair. So just on that, if these are a number of debts, why have we not gone through enforcement sooner on these? If we've carried on letting them accumulate a debt.
Can I go to Mr. Gill? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Some of you may or may not know, in my previous life, I was an enforcement officer for business rates and council tax. So I have huge experience in dealing with these debts. The position is that as soon as the company is made insolvent or dissolved, we cannot do anything further with it in terms of billing or enforcing. What we would do is we would lodge a claim with the administrator or the receiver, and in the event that the administrator or receiver is able to recoup any funds, then we may get a proportion of the pounds. So we might get a penny in the pound, or 5p in the pound, or 10p in the pound. The problem is that we are unsecured creditors, and in most of these companies' cases, they tend to have a charge or a floating charge over all of their assets. And in the event that the company does go bust, then it's the banks or the financial institutions which will trigger their floating charge and effectively take control of all of the assets. In terms of taking action against companies over a period of time, there is a fine balance, because do you want to go and enforce against the company in such a way that the result is that the company is forced to close? You might get your money, but the result of that is the company might close down and you might be putting a lot of people out of work. So there is a balance to be drawn all the time, and it is difficult. The main way of recovering money from businesses is by seizing their goods. And if there's a charge, a floating charge over the property, the assets, you can't do that. So it's a matter of trying to get as much out of them as you can by negotiation, because basically our hands are tied in trying to recover the full amount. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Councillor David Lloyd, would you like to come back?
No, that's thank you for the explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lloyd. There doesn't seem to be any other questions. So we have two recommendations: that the contents of the report be noted and that members approve the write-off as detailed at paragraph 3 of this report. I shall move. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded.
I can second that, Chair.
I believe Councillor Ridley second first, Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Councillor Ridley seconding. Therefore, we shall go to the vote. Councillor Tucker, Mr. Tucker, even.
Promotion.
That was an insult.
Demotion, I'm not sure. Just to clarify, Chair, I won't invite Councillor Broadley or Councillor Eaton to vote on this item because unfortunately they were absent for part of it. So under the Constitution that precludes them from voting. So just if anybody picks up on that.
Excuse me, Mr. Tucker, I don't think that's quite right. The only time you're excluded from voting is on a development control or licensing. It doesn't apply to other committees unless somebody's rewritten the Constitution without us knowing.
It actually applies to all committees.
Mr. Gill, even.
It applies to every decision made by the council. The members should have heard all of the argument, all of the discussion before they're entitled to make a vote. It's not peculiar to licensing and planning. It's every committee.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Therefore, we shall go to the.
I'm sorry, Chair. This is absolutely wrong. We've had long discussions on this one, and I think we're being asked to do something which is incorrect now. I'm absolutely 100% certain Councillor Bolter is absolutely right. It was only on licensing and it was only on planning where we're sitting in a semi-judiciary committee. We've had this discussion when we've had meetings at the council chamber. If somebody's had to go out for a minute and has come back in, they have been able to vote. And we've had this long discussion with Mr. Gill, I think. And I'm sorry.
And Mr. Gill's view has always been that it is not permissible, if you have not heard all of the debate, for you to make a decision. The suggestion that you're making, Councillor Kaufman, is that you could have an hours-long debate, somebody could wander in 5 minutes before the end of that debate, and then sit and vote on a matter when they'd not heard all of the argument. That goes against the principle of attending a meeting with an open mind and listening to the debate before you make your decision.
Well, that happens every day in the Houses of Parliament because
Councillor Kaufman, this is not the House of Parliament.
I don't wish Councillor Kaufman and Mr. Gill. I am the chair of this committee, and you speak through me. Councillor Boyce, thank you.
Good evening, all. Thank you, Chair. We have had this debate on many occasions. Mr. Gill and I do not necessarily agree on this because he used, other than the fact he used the word should. In my view, this is a whippable motion, and it's not an important motion in that sense. I don't think it's going to be lost or anything silly. However, you are, as a political group, entitled to whip your members. I'm sure Pretty likes whipping her counterpart on a regular occasion. The issue, of course, is that it's unfortunate two members were unable to listen to the whole debate. I don't think it actually makes any difference in this instance. I do believe you're entitled to whip, and therefore I do seem to remember many years ago whipping my deputy at the time out of bed because he didn't feel very well to vote on the budget. So my view is quite clear that you are entitled to vote. However, in this instance, as it makes no difference, let's not argue too much.
Thank you, Mr. Boyce. Any other questions? Replies? No. Therefore, we shall go to the vote, but I would like it clarified for the next full council, because we cannot have a situation where we are not assured of what we're entitled to do if we have power cuts, etc., etc. Councillor Linda Broadley.
So just to clarify, am I voting or am I not?
Yes, I'd like to know that as well, if you don't mind.
I'll leave that up to my leader, Councillor Boyce.
Thank you, Chair. I think rather than have an argument this evening on an issue that, frankly, I do not believe is likely to cause a problem in terms of voting or not, I think we should leave it. However, I do agree with the chair. I think we need to have this discussion outside of the chamber and come to a conclusion in the longer term. So I would suggest that this moment in time you refrain from voting. And interestingly, I do not mean you abstain. You cannot abstain on an issue either, according to Mr. Gill's logic. That's equally as bad as going for or against. So I think they simply would be excluded from the vote this time, and we'll sort it out outside the chamber.
Thank you, Mr. Boyce. Therefore, Councillor Linda Broadley and Linda Eaton will not take part in this vote. Therefore, we shall go to the vote. Mr. Tucker.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Bolter.
For.
Councillor Boyce.
For.
Councillor Dar.
Oh.
Councillor Gamble.
For.
Councillor Joshi.
Sorry, did you? 4.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey Kaufman.
4.
Councillor Lily Kaufman.
4.
Councillor David Lloydall.
4.
Councillor Kevin Lloydall.
4.
Councillor Ridley.
4.
Thank you, Chair. So that's 11 votes in favour.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Therefore, we go to agenda item 10, standard and ethical indicators, quarter 1 to 3, 2020/2021. Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Chair. This is a standard report which brings information to this committee on the standards and ethical indicators. The report is self-explanatory. I'll keep it very brief. In terms of member complaints, in quarters 1, 2 and 3, we had 1 complaint, and that was in quarter 2 of 2020-21, and that complaint was by an officer concerning a member and a lack of respect that the officer claimed was shown to them. After further reflection on that complaint, the officer decided that they didn't wish the matter to be taken any further, and the matter was resolved by offering words of advice to the member and a suggestion of a period of reflection on the impact of the member's behaviour on the staff member, and that's how it was resolved. Looking at the indicators, they're all fairly standard. The only point to note of any particular issue is in terms of food safety inspections, which is at the bottom of page 59. You will see that we are behind on our food safety inspections. That's a direct result of the changing advice from the FSA. We've been unable to conduct formal inspections throughout the pandemic, and we are still in a position where the guidance is that we shouldn't be undertaking them. What we're trying to do at the moment is assess compliance by telephone calls, by risk assessments, by information that we're requiring from the owners, and we're also exploring the possibility of doing inspections via video platforms such as Zoom, WhatsApp, etc., so we can get a sight into the premises. And then finally, the other point is that there's been a huge increase in new business starting from home. These are mainly home caterers, no doubt you've seen them all over the social media, selling cakes and biscuits and Sunday lunches, etc. In those instances, what we have done, we have ensured that they have registered as a food business operator, and then we've provided as much support, guidance and advice to them to try and ensure that they are compliant with food safety regulations. And interestingly, during this period, we've not had any major issues with regard to food safety complaints from the public. So we're satisfied as far as we can be that the food safety operators are complying to the best of their ability. I'm happy to take any questions if members have any on that report.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. At the bottom of page 59, the last line, you've used the word complaint has been used, and I think it should be compliant and not complaint.
That's correct. I suspect that is the wonders of autocorrect. I apologise for that.
And it proves that I've read it.
Thank you, Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Councillor Kaufman. Councillor Linda Broadley.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing really about the report, but we used to have this colour-coded red, yellow and green to show which were in the red, if you like. Could that be possible to do it? It makes it a lot easier for members. Thank you.
We could certainly do that on the online version, Councillor. I mean, one of the issues is, as part of the economy drive that I'm trying to encourage within my team, I do try and resist having coloured paper, because a black and white sheet of paper costs 2 pence, a coloured piece of paper costs 10 pence. If members want that, we will certainly deal with it. But you know, now that we are moving to a sort of virtual world and people have got iPads, we can have coloured copies on the system if that would assist, and try to continue the efficiency drive.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Councillor Broadley.
Sorry, just to say that at the moment, because we are Zooming our meetings, it would be handy if the papers came through, because I've only got the papers. I've got one iPad, so I have to look at my papers rather than looking at the iPad. Once we get back into the council chamber and I can use the iPad in the council chamber, it could be different. But at the moment, with having a paper copy and using my iPad for the meeting, I would like it in colour so that I can see it quite clearly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Broadley. I think that's a good idea until we go back to some sort of normality. Any other questions? No. Well, we'll note that report as it's to be noted. We shall move on to agenda item 11, section 106, open space, sports and recreation contributions update March 2021. Over to you, Emma.
Chair, it's actually me.
Adrian even.
Report. This report provides a regular annual update in relation to Section 106 contributions relating to open space, sport and recreational infrastructure projects. One of the main purposes of this report is to provide a list of potential open space, sport and recreation infrastructure projects that can help to mitigate the impact of new development. This list is then used when negotiating with developers over Section 106 contributions. In the past, legislation has restricted the number of Section 106 contributions that could be pulled together, which meant that the list could only contain relatively small items of infrastructure. That restriction has now been removed, so there is now no limit on the number of Section 106 contributions that can be pulled. As a result, a new list has been compiled of concept projects covering parks and town centres. The idea is that a number of different projects can combine in a single location to make a bigger impact on the Section 106 contribution that we receive. It's acknowledged that the availability of Section 106 funds may not allow for all of the projects in a single location to be delivered together, and there is still the option for different elements to be delivered individually at different times. Some elements may require feasibility analysis, and that would be funded via Section 106 monies or other external funding. Section 106 covers both capital and revenue funding, so the revenue element can be used for maintenance. The report also suggests that priority locations are identified at Uplands Park, Willow Park and Blaby Road Park, and also in the town centres, so that some of the Section 106 money can be used to implement some of the outcomes of the master planning work. If there's any questions, then I'm happy to do my best to answer them.
Councillor Jeffrey Kaufman, I presume.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I welcome this list. It's an aspiration. It's got no money on the list there, but it got an aspiration. But can I ask about Uplands Park on page 67? It talks about the tennis courts being moved from Uplands Park, Ellis Park to Uplands Park, part of the aspiration, part of the discussion that we had. I don't understand it, but do we have to wait for the 106 money to be found? Because I think it's rather important that the tennis courts are replaced before we lose the ones in Ellis Court. And I'm not quite sure the implications of this report. If things work out and we go ahead with the redevelopment of the swimming pool, as we've discussed and is mentioned down here, will it be possible to replace them before we get 106 money? Or have we got to wait for 106, so for a period of time we won't have those tennis courts? Thank you.
If it's done through the Section 106 process, then the development is likely needed to come forward, or at least being granted planning permission. before they can be replaced. Usually the developer needs to have done some construction and sold some of the properties before they're in a position to be able to pay the Section 106 monies. However, in this case, because it's a council site and the council has more control over it, it's likely that we could deal with it through a process other than Section 106, and therefore the tennis courts could be moved and constructed prior to development of the site.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thorpe. Councillor Bolter.
Thank you. It's an interesting report. The only question I've got to ask is that this is the capital bit of the report, but ongoing revenue costs are quite large. Mr. Thorpe, I think he said you could put the revenue from 106 into this, but for how long? How many years? I mean, these things are going to last for a good number of years. And where's the money coming from to maintain them, 10 years' time? Thank you.
That is correct. So when we negotiate the Section 106 using the play and open space guidance, then there's a contribution for capital and also a contribution for maintenance. The maintenance isn't indefinite. I think it's generally around about a period of 20 years, but it can vary depending on the type of infrastructure. But the idea is certainly that the maintenance period is sufficient to last as long as the infrastructure that's installed. After the maintenance period, though, however, if that infrastructure is still in place, then yes, it would need to be picked up by the council. So before we bring forward any schemes, we need to make sure that we are in a position to fund the long-term maintenance if that becomes necessary.
So is this extra money, this revenue money, ring fence for this purpose in our accounts, or does it fit into the general fund? How's it organised?
I don't think at the moment it is ring fenced, but there is Mr. Campbell probably had to comment more on this if he's still in the meeting as he is. But I think in theory it can be ring fenced for that specific purpose. But of course it gives us more flexibility in terms of how we spend our money if we don't ring fence it to a particular item.
You happy? Well, you're not happy, Mr. Councillor Bolter, because you're never happy. But is that
I just like things straight, Chair, because I don't like spending money, then find out I can't maintain it after I've already got it. And Mr. Thorpe said now that we could get the money paid up to 20 years. That's fine, but I'd like it to go into a separate account, because if things get tight, that money will be used for other purposes, and the play equipment or whatever we do will start deteriorating, and we can't replace it. So, we need a bit of clarity on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Bolter. Councillor Joshi.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on page 67 about Uplands Park. If we're using 106 money to refurb the sports facilities of the existing sports facilities, is there room or money available to upgrade the toilets for the park users? That we discussed this a while ago about the parks, and it was very expensive to just do the toilet facilities. But can that be, again, I guess what Councillor Bolter said, could it be ring fenced for that for any reason at all?
We don't actually have any toilets on Uplands Park.
No, we don't. No, we don't. No, but the proposal was, and I've spoken at length at different times about the to have toilet facilities available for the walkers around the park, and mainly the elderly walkers in the morning. Residents have said, it would be great to have some sort of facility. So what my question is, so if we're using 106 money to upgrade the existing sports facilities, could that be incorporated into the plan?
I think the answer to that question is yes. If we're upgrading the facilities for users of the park, then in theory it could be spent on providing toilets, as it could be spent on providing other facilities within an enhanced pavilion. But I suppose that there's a separate element to the question, and that's whether that relates to the council's policies on provision of toilets. So the Section 106 money could be used for it potentially, but as I said, I think there's a separate part of that question as to what the council's approach is in terms of provision of toilets on Uplands Park.
Councillor Pretty.
Yeah, if I can come back to that, I totally understand that, because I think we'd made that decision about closing all the toilets elsewhere because they weren't actually being used and it was costing more to maintain them. So as a separate thing, because there weren't any toilets available within the park area, and a lot of residents who walk there are elderly, they need that facility. It was going to cost us to build them, so therefore we parked that. But now that we've got a bit of money from the 106, which is meant to be used for these sort of things, I just wondered whether it could be sort of, brought into the discussion at all.
Yeah, I think that the point I would clarify in response to that question is at the moment we don't have the money. This sort of menu of potential infrastructure is things that we can negotiate with a developer should the opportunity arise. So at the moment we don't have the money available.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Joshi.
When you say you don't have the money available, so does that mean money available to allocate to other things apart from what you've already discussed? I know we physically won't have the money, but the plans are that you're upgrading the sports facilities.
Yeah, so in terms of the purpose of the report, it's identifying a number of projects that can be delivered in the borough. And then those projects are used when the planning officers come to negotiate with developers over Section 106 agreements. So that as a council, we can demonstrate that these are the projects that we want to deliver in order to mitigate the impact of that development. We can then combine those Section 106 payments into pots that we can then use to deliver the projects that we've identified.
Okay, I don't think that answers my question, but I think I'll take it outside of this meeting perhaps to get a bit more clarification on what you mean.
Thank you, Councillor Joshi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kevin Lloyd.
Thank you, Chairman. Page 69. 68 it starts on and then carries over to 69. I welcome the report there. I think it's quite positive. Willow Park, and looking at the something that was suggested some time ago with regards to putting distant markers around the footpath at different measures, i.e. the start point, 50 metres, 100 metres, and so on, which would help people quite a lot to, as it says there, it's a good report actually, it talks about health and well-being and so on, how people's mental health can be helped by monitoring what they do, how they do it. Not all got Fitbits and things like that monitors what they're doing. So I welcome that. I know on recommendation 2 that it's a priority location. Is it a realistic option that it can be done? Thank you.
Yeah, it certainly is a realistic option that the projects can be delivered. As I say, we're regularly negotiating Section 106 contributions in relation to new dwellings that are provided in the borough, and we can pour that money to bring forward these schemes. So yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Aidan.
Thank you, Councillor Kevin Lloyd. Councillor David Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy the report's come forward, and I do like the fact that Wigston Meadows has been put on there on page 68. Couple of things on that. Is Wigston Meadows, are we talking about Wigston Meadows, the original Wigston Meadows, or are we talking about the new development also being called Wigston Meadows? That's the first point. if the second point is this going far enough in terms of significant spend it on this area with the additional houses being added to the Wigston Meadows area? And the third point, I'll probably get shot in the foot for this one, is Wigston Meadows is not added and is not listed there as a priority area. As far as I can see, it's Uplands Park, Willow Park, Blaby Road Park. With the significant amount of future residents coming onto the Wigston Meadows area, why has that not been even considered for a priority area? And they're my points. Thank you.
Okay, so the report refers to the existing or the old Wigston Meadows area. In terms of the new Wigston Meadows development, then all of the open space provision will be provided by the developer on site. And certainly with the scale of the development that's coming forward there'll be a significant amount of open space provided on site. So that open space that's provided by the developer will meet the needs of the people moving onto that estate, and of course can also be used by people that already live in the borough as well.
Thank you, Mr. Thorpe. Councillor Lloyd, would you like to come back?
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Mr. Thorpe, for that. Thank you, Chair. So we seem to have a neglect then for the original Wigston Meadows area, because we seem to have a significant amount of money being spent elsewhere in the borough that is on things like play equipment and skate parks or sports facilities, whereas we don't have that on the Wigston Meadows area. I feel like the original Meadows has been neglected, to say the least, and I just want to note that I would like to prioritise the Wigston Meadows area, because we have been neglected in investment on things like parks and things like that, and open spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lloyd. I think our main objective is to do the 3 major parks in 3 town centres, and obviously the other open spaces, for instance, Coombe Park in Boothby, it's not on the priority list. So we do have to prioritise, but obviously as board members, it's your right to pick up a fuss and try and get more for your residents. So I welcome that. Councillor Linda Broadley.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm going back a bit to what was said about the Uplands Park and Councillor Josh's question about it. So basically, Mr. Thorpe, what you're saying is that this list here is a wish list of things that we would want to do as and when 106 monies come in. There isn't the money there at the moment, but as 106 monies come in, these are the things that we want doing. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And just to add to that, the importance of this is that it enables us to negotiate with developers where that's necessary to identify what we're going to spend the Section 106 money on.
Right.
To negotiate a Section 106, we need to identify a deficiency, something that isn't there at the moment, or something that needs improving, so that we can link that to the development and what the development needs to pay to mitigate.
Yeah, so it's a wish list. I understand that bit. The with regards to the toilets at Upland Park, the discussions in the past, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it wasn't so much about whether we could put toilets there, although it was obviously the cost before we put down about the upgrade. It was the maintenance of the toilets and who's going to open and close them in the mornings and who is entitled to a key for the toilets. I thought that was the issue about us having toilets there. I know it's probably not your field, as you say, that comes under the public toilets policy thing. but I thought it was down to the maintenance and the opening and closing, not the fact that we hadn't got them there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Broadley. I think that's a rhetorical question. So it is historical, unless Adrian wants to come back.
No, I think I've already given an answer to that question. I mean, I can reiterate that I think that the point of this report is talking about providing facilities for, certainly on Uplands Park, people that will be using the sport facilities, not necessarily public toilets. And I think there's a distinction that needs to be made there.
Mr. Gill.
Yeah, yes, thank you. That comes under my remit. The issue with the toilets at Uplands is the access, the fact that they form part of the changing facilities, and there is no external access that the public could utilise without going through the changing room, and that presents all sorts of problems and issues in respect of safeguarding. And as Councillor Broadley quite rightly said, there's issues about who's going to have keys, who's going to lock up, what's going to happen if the football team is in there or the cricket team is in there, changing, etc. So that's one of the difficulties with regard to opening them up for the general public.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Councillor Lily Kaufman.
Thank you, Chair. This aspiration list is very promising and very good, but they are aspirations, and I hope they will come to fruition eventually. Now, as the ward councillor for Uplands, I have had this conversation about public toilets, and the police are very, very against it. We've had antisocial behaviour in the car parks in the past at Uplands Park, and I think we've managed to quell that quite a bit. When I was talking to the residents about public toilets, and we did have quite a wide conversation with all sorts of bodies, I think the result was it will create antisocial behaviour. And obviously this is something we are really, really trying to avoid. I mean, there is a toilet there, but that's for the sports people and for the people using the pavilion. A public toilet is really a no-no. It will create antisocial behaviour. And if the residents want that, that's fine. But I don't think they really do. We've been fighting against that for quite some time. So I would be against it because it will affect the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lily Kaufman. Councillor John Boyce.
Thank you, Chair. I need to reiterate what Adrian said, which is that basically, unless you have a wish list, you cannot have a section 106. And it also follows, unless you have development, you can't have a section 106 either. And that is something that we need to grasp as well. The Meadows is an interesting case. There will be significant open space on that development, as the same in Cottage Farm. Cottage Farm has been easier to link with Coombe Park, whereas the Meadows hasn't been that well linked. I will accept that. But one of the things in the report, it says quite clearly, it is for members to bring forward schemes that they think would help. Now, the officers have brought forward what I think is a significant and very good list of things that need to be done. There is always the opportunity to tweak the list. There is always the opportunity to put things on which nobody's thought about. But having done that, the important thing is you only get section 106 out of development. And that means change, and that means quite frankly, the 106 is about offsetting the damage done by development. And we need to remember that. There is a technical question, Adrian. How close to any particular development does the 106 need to relate? So if there was more money from the Meadows development, can it be spent on the old Meadows? That's close enough, I would suggest. But you cannot spend money in Oadby and South Wigston, or can you? Has that changed?
It's always better to spend the money in the town where the development is being built, because we need to demonstrate that it's linked to the development. However, because our borough is quite small, there can sometimes be some flexibility over that in terms of our negotiations with the developers. So to some extent, it depends how generous the developers are in terms of negotiation of the Section 106.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Councillor Boyce. Councillor Naveed Allen.
Thank you, Chair. So, just listening to what Mr. Thorpe said about this wish list, what's the likelihood of any of this actually going to happen? That's one question. And the second question is, what's the rationale, or what criteria do we have to look at in order to put something on this list from the members to then put forward to the development? Because if I look at Uplands Park, and where you talk about moving a tennis court from Ellis Park, that seems a little bit nonsensical to me, that you're taking one tennis court to another place and it's going to cost £300,000. So I just want to know what's the rationale of putting proposing something on this, and whether or not this is actually going to happen. Two questions.
Okay, well, in answer to the question as to the likelihood of the things that are on the list happening, it is very likely, because for all new dwellings that come forward in the borough, we're able to negotiate a Section 106 contribution for clear and open space. So there will be money coming into the council. The fact that we've actually got a list that we can use in terms of negotiating the Section 106s, and the fact that we've prioritised areas that we now know that we want to spend the money on, will enable us to spend that money on those things when it comes in. In terms of Ellis Park and the potential of moving the tennis courts to Uplands Park, of course that is partly linked to the proposal that members have previously considered in relation to Ellis Park. So there will potentially be a link between that proposal and moving the tennis courts. And as Councillor Boyce said, in terms of bringing forward other projects, then I would welcome members to do that, would encourage them to do so. And we do have a Section 106 officer working group that would be able to consider those things that members have put forward, to make sure that they're still compliant. That means to make sure that there's something that we can ask for under the Section 106 legislation. And if we can, then we can add them to the list.
Thank you, Mr. Thorpe. Councillor Allen, would you like to come back?
No, that's answered my question nicely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Kevin Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair. Adrian, it's interesting what you say. You've got some advice from the point of view of the new development. We're working with the police and their buildings officer, who receives the plans as they do. He then puts a recommendation forward of things that he might want to see, not police stations, as he previously. For example, we've met with him. He's come to my committee. What we're looking for is lamp standards which are fitted with CCTV. There are special lamp standards which are already made, and he was going to go away and then put an application forward, but we've not heard anything since. So I've chasing it for my next CSP meeting, which is in April. Is the process where the plans go to him, he then puts forward an application for these lampposts, which are highways. Does that then have to go to highways, and highways come to you and say, can we negotiate these special lampposts? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I would imagine that if we're talking about putting CCTV cameras on lampposts, which are, as you say, part of the highways and also owned by Leicestershire County Council, then we would need their permission to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's not the CCT cam. We've got those. We've managed to get those over a period of time. We've got money in the budget to buy some new ones. It's the actual lampposts. What we're doing at the moment, we're converting several, about 45. We've got the money to do that around the borough for demountable CCTV. There's an opportunity here to work with the police and the county and yourselves to say, rather than us converting the lampposts that go up, if we can do that right at the very beginning, that's going to save time and effort and money that may have to be spent in future time. But it's a process of how that works. Does it go from the police to the county then to you to put that in as a suggestion for future 106?
Yeah, certainly. I think that when Section 106 is being negotiated, if the police were requesting that CCTV cameras be installed on lampposts, that could be considered as part of the Section 106 process.
Yeah, just to clarify, it's not the CCTV cameras itself. The lampposts are specifically designed to receive CCTV, because the ones that we've got are actually flexible, that if when we've got a problem somewhere, we can move them. We've identified where the lampposts are through the police and the fire, and all that's been done. So we can move them if there's a problem. We can move them there. We can move them here, because we've converted those lampposts. So it's the lampposts that are readily made with the CCTV, with the structure and the works in them to receive CCTV if we need to move them if there's a problem. That's all. It's not the cameras. We've got those. They're okay. It's the lampposts themselves, which are specifically designed to receive CCTV in the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it just seems to me a case of making sure that we're joined up between ourselves and the county council, who will own the lampposts, and the developer who can state they'll be installed on. So perhaps it's something that we can talk about separately outside of the meeting.
Oh, that'd be helpful. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Lloydell. Hopefully, last to speak, Councillor John Boyce.
Thank you, Chair. As it happens, I was going to come back on the interesting discussion between Councillor Lloydell and Adrian regarding lampposts. If it's a new build, presumably we could put in and negotiate with county a standard which actually incorporates precisely that problem. So it could actually become a planning condition, not a Section 106 condition. That would be one way forward. The other issue, I suppose, it's worth having a quick, slightly tangential discussion about the fact that county are in the process of considering a policy on 106 agreements relating to county. We have been exceptionally practical, exceptionally sensible about what we put down. County, on the other hand, are asking us to underwrite all Section 106 agreements, which means that if you're looking at a new road, for instance, and the development becomes unsustainable if it includes the new road, county want the districts to pay for them. In essence, that's the position that is being negotiated. There are lots of ongoing discussions, including taking legal advice, because we believe what county have both written and proposed is probably not legal. However, once it is resolved or understood what's going to happen, we will bring it forward and explain to people.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. Are there any other questions? No. We have the 3 recommendations. We shall go to the vote. Mr. Tucker?
Chair, I don't believe it's been moved and seconded yet.
Oh, sorry. I shall move the recommendations.
I can second that, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Kevin Lloydall. We shall go to the vote. Mr. Tucker.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Bolter.
For.
Councillor Boyce.
For.
Councillor Broadley.
For.
Councillor Dar.
For.
Councillor Eaton.
For.
Councillor Gamble.
For.
Councillor Joshi.
For.
Councillor Jeffrey Kaufman.
For.
Councillor Lily Kaufman.
For.
Councillor David Lloydall.
For.
Councillor Kevin Lloydall.
For.
Councillor Ridley.
For.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Before I close the meeting, I'd just like to remind members if they'd like to stay on after the meeting. Right, I shall close the meeting then. Thank you very much for attending.